Hi guys, welcome to my channel. I'm Jason White, and this is my channel, Jason's Weird Reads. If you're brand new here and you like reading horror fiction, science fiction, and fantasy, please hit the subscribe button and comment down below and we'll discuss some books. Alright, so I've seen some people doing this. One of them was Kasha, Kasha in Bookland. She did a bunch of short horror books recommendation, and I've been wanting to do something like this for a while as well, so I thought I'd jump on board. And so this is my my recommendations for horror novellas, basically. They're all basically below 200 pages, and honestly, a lot of them are probably below 100 pages. The reason why I think it's cool to get these recommendations is for a few reasons. One, I think horror fiction works best in the shorter medium, and two, it's just fun to knock off a book in one day when you lead a fairly busy life, and some of these books are really easy to knock off in one day. Alright, so first up, especially in these tumultuous times, I have The Ballad of Black Tom. Now what this book does is it takes one of Lovecraft's, everyone knows that H.P. Lovecraft was a racist, and Victor Lavalle takes one of his ugliest stories and turns it into this story here. And as a caveat, not all of Lovecraft's stories were racist. The Horror at Red Hook, I believe the story title was fairly racist, along with one or two others. And if you want to continue reading Lovecraft, don't read his poetry at all. But I'll read you the synopsis here. It's, Charles Thomas Tester hustles to put food on the table to keep a roof over his father's head. From Harlem to Flushing Meadows to Red Hook, he knows what magic a suit can cast, the invisibility a guitar case can provide, and the curse written on his skin that attracts the eyes of wealthy folks and their cops. But when he delivers an occult book to a reclusive sorceress in the heart of Queens, Tom opens a door to a deeper realm of magic and earns the attention of things best left sleeping. A storm that might swallow the whole world is building in Brooklyn. Will Black Tom live to see it break? This book really does deal with the idea of police following a person just because of the color of their skin, and it deals with certain social movements that are working right now. So if you're looking for something that's timely and short, this is definitely the book to go with. I absolutely loved it. It's very Lovecraftian, and it clocks in at about 149 pages. You should be able to read this in one day. I don't think I did, but yeah, it's very, very well written, and I absolutely love it. All right, next up I have A Few by Chad Lutzke. I discovered Chad Lutzke, I think, in the second half of last year, 2019, and I started off with this book, Same Deep Water as You. Now this book, it goes for about, let me see here, trying to find the end, 109 pages, and the print, if you can see, is very, very, very suited to people's eyes. And I read this in one sitting. I absolutely loved it. Here is the synopsis for this one. Music, beer, skateboarding, and tragedy star in this coming-of-age lesson on love and lust, and the line that divides them, as 19-year-old Jex experiences a life that meets river's edge, and kids with dazed and confused, a parentless indie yarn with the dark heart Lutzke is known for. And there's an introduction by Mark Matthews. So this book takes you back to the 80s, and it didn't really remind me too much of my own childhood, but I identified with the characters. All the characters are people I've known, and I absolutely love this story. It's just a lot of fun, and it's not just fun though. It's actually very heart-wrenching as well. And I highly recommend it if you like heart-wrenching, and we have some more heart-wrenching books coming because we also have Stirring the Sheets by Chad Lutzke. This book is very small. I mean, it's like a paperback pocket book, and it is at about 103 pages. And this is a story about overcoming grief, especially in your old age. It's about a mortician who's in his twilight years who loses his wife to, I believe it was cancer. I don't know if it was cancer or if like a brain aneurysm or something like that. But one day he's at work. It's about a year after his wife's death, I think, and he still hasn't gotten over it. He's still trying to adjust. And a woman's body comes in at work for him to prepare, and it looks exactly like his wife when she was younger. And so he decides one night, while obsessing about it at home, to go back to the morgue or to the funeral home, and he takes the body back home with him. Now, a lot of people have put up front that there's no necrophilia in this, and I definitely agree. There is no necrophilia in this. This is not a story about having sex with dead bodies or lusting after his ex-wife. It's more about how much he misses her. He takes her home and he takes care of her like he would. It's basically a way for him to overcome his grief. All in all, it's a very touching story about a man who misses his late wife, and he's coming to terms with his own old age and his own mortality. And I highly recommend it. It's a very touching story. Finally, by Chad Lutzke, I have Out Behind the Barn. This is by John Boden and Chad Lutzke. This book, I believe John Boden started writing this book, and Chad Lutzke sort of finished it for him. In, like across, I guess the story that's told in the back of this book in the acknowledgments, or whatever you call it, is that John Boden sent him this story. Sent Chad Lutzke this story, and Chad Lutzke said, you should change this, and that. And then he eventually just made those changes for him, and then I guess they just collaborated on the touch-ups and whatnot. This is a story about... Actually, I went into this fairly blind because the back synopsis doesn't really tell you what it's about, but it gives you an idea of where it's going. And I think it's good to go into this blind because it's quite the ride. The boys crept to and this is actually from the very first page. That's from the very first chapter anyway. So the boys crept to the window and watched as Miss Maggie carried the long bundle into the barn, the weight of it stooping her aging back. Rafter lights spilled from the barn doors, and Davy saw an arm fall from the canvas-wrapped parcel. He smiled. "She's got someone." Both children grinned and settled in their beds, eyes fixed to the ceiling. This was family growth. So there's something weird going on in this book, obviously, and has something to do with stolen children and somebody who's keeping them there. And it's not like heartwarming in the sense, or touching in the sense that Chad Lutzke's other works are, but there is a bit of a twist in this book that needed to be, otherwise this book might not have worked. But it's a very good book, and I absolutely loved reading it. So, next we have 2 books by Michael Griffin. I just reviewed this one, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I really enjoyed this book. I was sent a copy of it from Undertow Publications for my honest review, and I absolutely loved it. It's basically a story where you don't know exactly what's going on. There's 4 characters trapped in what's like an underground bunker, or perhaps a government testing facility. We're not exactly sure, but we follow these characters as they go on their daily routine, because they do have a routine. It's almost as if they're being monitored. And one of the routines I found interesting was that they take medication. But there's 4 strong characters in here, and they all they all sort of clash, and it's very interesting to see where this book goes. So I definitely recommend Armageddon House by Michael Griffin. I think I finished this in 2 sittings, and this book is at about 120 pages long, exactly, actually, and it's a lot of fun. It keeps you thinking. Next up, by Michael Griffin, I have Hieroglyphs of Blood and Bone. I don't have the physical copy of this book, so I'm just going to read the synopsis from my phone here. When Guy's marriage of 2 decades unravels, he's driven from his previously stable domestic life and ends up renting a room in the houseboat of his much younger co-worker Carl. Pushed outside of his comfort zone, Guy tries to follow Carl's example and ends up exploring entirely new frontiers, both natural and uncanny. He finally encounters the enigmatic Lily, who offers to share with Guy her own arcane language, a mix of incomprehensible symbols, rough bits of nature, and dark pleasures of the flesh. Guy finds himself obsessed, as if powerless under Lily's spell. Will he recognize, in time, the many secrets she keeps hidden in plain sight, or will allow himself to be pulled downstream toward an inescapable vortex? So this is another weird fiction story, and I'm going to leave it at that because it's very strange. I remember thinking of it as sort of like a man whose wife leaves him, and so his regular life has been upended and changed drastically, and he kind of goes crazy. But there's other things that are involved, like you don't know if Guy is actually a good guy or not. So definitely and this whole character Lily, you don't even know if she's real, so definitely check this book out. That's just like a very brief synopsis. I don't think it's completely spoilers, because you have to go from one part to the next. There's not necessarily any reveals so much as the journey as to what this character is experiencing. And there's some funny parts too, like at the beginning when he's with his living with his friend. He's like a guy at 50 years old, and he's bunking with a 25-year-old who still goes out at night and parties, bar hopping, and he's trying to live that lifestyle, and it's just it's not working for him as you would think. All right, so I'm going to move on to Tim Curran now. Not all of these are like a bunch of authors or a bunch of books by one single author. There's after Tim Curran, I believe it's all single books by authors. So Tim Curran is a favorite author of mine. I've talked about him fairly extensively, including this first novella by him, and it's Headhunter. Here's the synopsis. Vietnam, 1970. A green hell where death waits behind every tree, in every pooling shadow, and in every mist-haunted hollow. Booby traps and bullets, landmines and rockets. Mike McKinney went to write about the war, about the terror and frustrations, soldiers and people, and a landscape forever altered by the conflict. But he ran across something even worse, a primeval horror straight out of the darkest Vietnamese folklore, a monstrosity that stalks human heads among the twisted jungled hills of the Central Highlands, and now it's hunting him, and nothing can stop it. This book is very, very unsettling. If you don't like war stories, you're not going to like this book, so this isn't exactly the greatest place to start Tim Curran, unless, like I said, you're into war stories, because this actually follows the Vietnam War. It follows like a Vietnam War narrative. It's almost as though Tim Curran had served in the Vietnam War, but obviously he didn't, because he's not like 80, right? But anyways, it's very highly recommended by me. I absolutely loved it. Up second here is Fear Me, and now these next 2 books, actually 3 books, or novellas by Tim Curran, I would recommend starting if you're interested in checking out Tim Curran. He's a very prolific author, and so it could be confusing as to where to start with him, but these 3 next books, definitely start with these books. I absolutely love them. First up is Fear Me. Here's the synopsis. Shattuck Valley, a maximum security prison that houses the worst of the worst. Drug gangs, psychopaths, rapists, gangsters, and outlaw bikers. In a place like that, a skinny little kid like Danny Palmquist doesn't stand a chance. It doesn't take long before the hard-timers move in on him. And then they begin to die horribly, in locked cells. When the lights go out at Shattuck Valley, the nightmare begins. When Danny Palmquist goes to sleep, something else wakes up. Something primeval. Something bloodthirsty. And if you mess with Danny Palmquist, it will find you. And in the darkness, nothing can save you. This book is very, very creepy. I absolutely loved it. And, it's a prison story, and those can be kind of fun. Okay, next up I have The Underdwelling. This is another very creepy story. And I must say that Tim Curran, he is very, very good at creating monsters, and you can tell when he's really into what he's writing because he just suddenly becomes very vivid and you're completely blown away. He's also very good at scaring you when he wants to. I'm rarely ever frightened by reading a book, but Tim Curran has frightened me, and The Underdwelling here actually gave me a nightmare. Here's the synopsis. With a kid on the way, Boyd needs the job bad. But the idea of going underground at the Hobart mine, down into the dark labyrinth tunnels to get the raw ore, left him with a brooding sense of unease. Maybe it was the fact that his father had died down there in the mines, or maybe it was something much worse. Digging a new drift down in level number 8, the lowest level of the mine, an immense shaft opens up. Boyd and a few other volunteers explore it. Some 400 feet down, they find a passage that leads to an immense cavern from prehistory. A petrified world. A prehistoric graveyard. Then a cave-in traps them down there. And in the darkness and dank shadows of a fossilized world, they realize they are not alone. Something has woken in the stone. Something ancient and terrible and coldly intelligent. And it's lonely. It's a very creepy book. And finally, for Tim Curran, I have Leviathan. Here's the synopsis. I remember really enjoying this book because it has a bit of a dysfunctional, alcoholic main character, and I really enjoy reading books by that, or with that kind of character trope in it, or character type. And here's the synopsis. There's something wrong on Seagull Island. When the atmospheric conditions are right, a doorway opens to a primeval world of monsters. The locals won't talk about it. They live in denial. But that's all about to change. Johnny Horowitz, a much despised member of the paparazzi, has gotten a glimpse of something from prehistory, and he isn't going to stop until he gets a photo of it. With Hurricane Amelia bearing down on the island, the doorway to prehistoric sea is about to be thrown wide, and Johnny plans on being there when it opens, with a camera in hand, regardless of the consequences. So if you haven't read Tim Curran, I highly recommend his books. He can write both long form and short form. I find that his short form books, his novellas, are often pack more of a punch. But if you're looking for a longer piece of fiction by him that will take you a lot longer to read, try Dead Sea. That's a very good book too. That was my first Tim Curran. Alright, next up I have The Girl in the Video by Michael David Wilson. And I read this recently, and it's very much it's very horrifying in the sense that it's about online stalking. I'm gonna read you the synopsis here. Tell me what you like. After a teacher receives a weirdly arousing video, his life descends into paranoia and obsession. More videos follow, each containing information so strange no stranger could possibly know. But who's sending them, and what do they want? The answers may destroy everything and everyone he loves. The girl in the video is The Ring meets Fatal Attraction for the iPhone generation. And that little last tag there, that this book is like The Ring meets Fatal Attraction, is pretty apt. It's very fun and somewhat disturbing read. The fun aspects come with the comedy that's in this book. It has its funny moments, but it also has its very dark and despairing moments. And there's also a lot of 80s music references, which I enjoyed. A lot of stuff you may not have heard of, though, so just, be forewarned on that. Alright, we're getting to the last 3 books here. Next up I have Halloween Fiend by C.V. Hunt. I read this last year, and I really enjoyed it. Let me read you the synopsis here. Strange isn't the small, quaint town it appears to be. It's haunted every night by a creature the townsfolk refer to as Halloween. Once the sun sets each day, Halloween emerges to collect its treats, a small, live offering from each household. The residents comply because no one wants to be the target of Halloween's tricks. But the nightmare of residing in Strange is nothing compared to the yearly ritual Halloween demands of its citizens on All Hallows Eve. This book is a lot of fun. Definitely read this at Halloween. You can read it at any time of the year, really. Did I mention it's by C.V. Hunt? I can't remember. But, yeah, she writes a very weird kind of... It's not weird fiction. It's very horrific. But it's very much a Halloween-themed book. If you really want to read something that has a Halloween feel to it, because this certainly does, then read this. C.V. Hunt manages to evoke those Halloween feelings, so you could read this now if you really, really want to summon that emotion, which I sometimes do, and or you could save it for Halloween. It's just a fantastic read. The book itself is 103 pages, and it's full of Halloween goodness. The monster itself in this book is really creepy, too. I absolutely loved it. Now, it's been a long time since I read this next book, but I remember having a lot of fun with it. And it's Ray Garton's Lot Lizards. I'm going to try to avoid the glare here. This book... Here, let me read you the synopsis. Like I said, it's been a long time. I don't remember it too well, but I do remember enjoying it a lot. A lot lizard is a female hooker who works a highway truck stop as her territory. When trucker Bill Ketter looks for a little relaxation and release, he discovers too late that he has bitten off more than he can chew. In fact, his lot lizard is one that does the biting. She is a vampire, one of number who move from one truck stop to the next under the watchful and vicious eye of the repulsive Carsey brothers. Against his will, Bill becomes one of the undead. He follows the brothers and their cargo to another stop where he meets his ex-wife and children, and Bill finds himself battling the vampires and their age-old leader for the life of his teenage son. Garton has created another small masterpiece, contemporary adult horror at its most gruesome and loaded with extra doses of sex and gore. The confined setting creates a perfect claustrophobic stage for the story, and the hellaciously quick pace never lets the action slow down. I remember this book being pretty fast and very action-packed with the horror. This one, I think, is one of the longest on this list. It clocks in at 189 pages. I believe you can find this on Amazon still, and it's a lot of fun. I remember the ending is just crazy in this book, but it's a very fun read, and you'll be able to breeze through it very quickly. And, it's a vampire story. I don't talk enough about vampires on here, and I absolutely love vampires. I want to read more vampire fiction. I've been wanting to for a year, and, every once in a while I come across a vampire book, but not enough of them, I don't think. Alright, finally, I read this one recently as well. This was sent to me by the author. It is The Hanover Block by Gregor Xane. This book is very strange. You could definitely put it in with weird fiction, or even bizarro fiction if you want. Here's the synopsis. Living on the long shadow of a tragic accident, Morton struggles through his solitary suburban life. He's resigned himself to a static existence, to living and dying in a world where every house looks exactly the same. Then he notices changes in his neighborhood. Tool sheds and playhouses are cropping up all over, hastily constructed and set at odd angles. The nutjob down the road builds an outhouse in the middle of his front yard, and the guy right next door is erecting 2 geodesic climbing domes, one nestled inside the other. People are doing strange things on their lawn, and there's a reason for this. It's that this thing here, on the cover, this weird abomination, actually appears, and it's appearing in people's backyards, and it has an effect on men, especially, where suddenly they want to do things to this thing, carnal things, lustful things, and so they're building these weird sheds and whatnot to cover these terrible carnal things that they want to do to that thing. And so it's a very odd story. Gregor Xane captures what it's like to feel lust, especially early on in life when you're first experiencing those emotions and feelings. And but he takes it to some very dark places, and it's a very fun read. I absolutely enjoyed it. All right, I think this video has gone on long enough. Thank you for, if you've stayed this long, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. So please keep being safe and keep being creative, and I will catch you guys in the next bookish video.